Right, everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Athletes Hub, our weekly football roundup. And today, as always, joined by my co-host, Mr. Flexx.
Yes, guys. How we doing?
How's it going? Very good.
Yes, can't complain, my man. Can't complain. Halfway through the week, that's always good. It's always good.
That's it, literally. So, again, guys, before we get into today's conversation, I want to remind you guys, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that notification bell for the latest videos, and also, guys, I want to see more comments in underneath our videos because, again, this is what it's all about. It's all about debates. It's all about discussion. So, guys, more comments on YouTube. We appreciate all your feedback and your support. So, yeah, make sure you've got your notifications on and hit that subscribe button on YouTube. But Flexx, I think. Congratulations is in order. I feel like your team pulled off a really, big upset, I would say, during the FIFA Club World Cup final. So I guess I was probably one of the people who did say that I was, expecting PSG to win comfortably based on their performances so far. But again, Chelsea went out there and defied the odds, and that's what football's about. It's about defying the odds, and I've got to say, listen, it was well deserved. I feel like Chelsea were fantastic on the day. I think every aspect of their game was spot on. From their pressing point of view, creating the chances. PSG just did not have any solutions, to be honest. So fair play.
Definitely is fair play, and definitely congratulations to, all the Chelsea supporters, and the club at large, because of course it was no mean feat, not just beating PSG, absolutely obliterating PSG, I don't think anyone in their wildest dreams could have considered a 3-0 scoreline. And not even just that, but 3-0 in the first half. And might I add, it could have been slightly more. Delap, had a great shot and Donnarumma pulled off an amazing save, So I think we've seen that, as I mentioned in the previous episode, that Chelsea in European Cup finals should not be doubted, So that's kind of where we are. A lot of people, I'm in different groups and stuff, and people saying, this is just a preseason cup and blah blah blah. And,
I don't think anyone cares about the FIFA Club World Cup, do they? To be fair, so
I think that's absolute bollocks. That's bollocks. You know what I mean? I think if United had won it, you wouldn't be calling it a preseason cup, and I don't think it's a preseason cup because it's happened in the postseason. Preseason is going to now happen. You know what I mean? So. How can it be a preseason cup, right? So it's good.
Honestly, one thing I'll say about Chelsea, Chelsea collect trophies. I think since the Abramovich era, which began just over 20 years ago, Chelsea pick up trophies, whether we like it or not. We look at one of the most successful clubs over the last 2 decades. Chelsea are in that conversation and probably lead that conversation, to be honest. So we give it credit where credit's due, and I agree with you. I thought that the game was really one-sided. I think tactically, Maresca got it spot on. And Enrique was looking for answers, looking for solutions, but just couldn't find it. I think João Pedro was fantastic. Palmer was great as well. I think everyone to a man actually did their jobs quite well and just nullified all the threats that PSG had. And PSG, at most of the time, as Chelsea broke forward, they looked quite shell-shocked in terms of how to deal with it, particularly the movement up front as well. Chelsea fully deserved it. But one thing I want to say, though, I didn't know that Donald Trump was a Chelsea fan because I saw him on that podium.
Yes.
The celebrations. It was very bizarre to see him as part of the celebrations. I didn't know he was a Chelsea fan, to be honest. So that was.
I mean, how could he not be, right? Donald Trump just wants to be on the side of the winner at the end of the day. So I don't think it would have mattered if it was Chelsea, if it was PSG or Botafogo. It wouldn't have mattered. He would have been there.
I think. Listen, you know what? Whoever wins the World Cup next year, I think he might change his nationality. And don't worry, he's not going to be the USA as well. They won't win it. So I think whoever wins the World Cup next year, I think Donald Trump is going to definitely change his nationality based on what we saw on Sunday.
Wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if it was Mexico that won the World Cup?
Honestly. That would be
yes.
honestly, man.
That would be absolutely crazy.
It was a good game from Chelsea's perspective. What did you think about the production, by the way? Because I remember watching it and I remember thinking this is a very Americanized product, from the players coming out one by one. Obviously, the pre-game show was what happens. We see that normally in big competitions and big matches. I can remember, I think was it Michael Buffer who was given the intro, the countdown to.
That's right.
That was a very the whole production came across to me as it was very sort of Americanized. What did you think about it?
Yeah, it's definitely different. I do like it because it's different, you know what I mean? And I think that makes it a bit of an appeal. Them players coming out one by one, you know, something you can get used to. I think
Yeah,
it's decent because maybe you get to see each individual player, so you kind of know the lineup. Like, I don't know, it's a bit different, I guess.
yeah. It's like the
So
NBA, isn't it? When the NBA players sort of get introduced one by one, they come on, they get their spotlight, they get introduced one by one, and then it's kind of it's almost like a show, isn't it? I think I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and it's
yeah,
like
that's a good way of looking at it.
Americans, as much as Americans love sports, at the same time, it's a production, it's a show. They want to give you a
Yeah.
spectacle. And the whole kind of production around it, the way that it was, even Donald Trump's interview afterwards as well, it's all part of a show. So I definitely believe that this is a taster in terms of what we're going to see next year with the World Cup.
Oh,
Um,
100%, 100%. And I like the show aspect of it because it makes it, you got to market the thing, right? It's a new
yeah,
tournament, so you've got to make it a bit showy and try different things and see what would work. And remember, this is for the Americans. It's not really for the rest of the world.
mm,
They're trying to, get buy-in from American fans and things like this. So they've got to do something that's close to what they're used to without
yeah,
losing the essence of what we know football to be. So I think it's striking the balance between those two things, and then we kind of see where we go from here. But
yeah,
speaking on Chelsea, once again, we needed that, considering the tough time the club has actually genuinely been through. So picking up a Club World Cup is fantastic. Picking up the finances that go along with it along the way to help with FFP, that's fantastic. So it just helps us, grow the club. It helps
yeah,
us, with our visions and plans of where we see ourselves in the next, say, 2 to 3 years, where we definitely don't want to be considered as, let's say top four challengers. We want to be considered as, one of the two teams that are fighting for, the Premier League, and, winning the Club World Cup certainly puts us in a position to be able to realize those aspirations somewhere down the line. So
yeah,
it's
yeah. I
good.
agree. I agree. So I think Chelsea and finances obviously are no strangers to each other, so we'll leave that there. Um, so we touched upon transfers last wech. This week,
That's
I
right.
think the major story so far this week has actually been Liverpool's approach to Newcastle for Alexander
Yes.
Isak, 120
Yes.
million pounds. When you see that, when you hear those figures going around, because I've always been someone recently who's been thinking these transfer figures that we've seen in modern football, even when you're looking at 40, 50 million pounds, I mean, 20 years ago, if you were paying 40 million pounds for a player, you were getting a decent player, a player who's a world class, a player who comes in your team and makes that difference. But it seems like nowadays, 40, 50 million pounds is almost like the minimum that you expect for average football players. So when you see 120 million pounds, firstly, is that too much for Isak? And secondly, do you feel like that is an offer that Newcastle can afford to refuse? Because listen, I know he's their key player, he's a star striker, he's a talisman in the team,
Yeah.
but 120 million pounds though, can you really, can you turn that offer down if you're Newcastle?
I don't think you can. I mean, there's two ways of looking at this, right? So, of course, Newcastle can turn down the offers. The club is incredibly wealthy. The problem they have is that because of FFP and the sustainability rules, the club cannot realize its wealth without those players leaving the club, right? So getting that 120 million, if they choose to accept it, puts them in a position where they can spend more than 120 million to improve the club overall. So if they leave it in a situation where they don't and they reject that bid and they don't take that 120 million, then we won't see Newcastle improve too much from where they are already because of the FFP situation, right? So I feel like from that perspective, it's money that they've got to accept, or depending if the structure of the deal is good, right? How much of that money is upfront, how much of that money is in installments, how much of that money is in performance based, these type of things. It's got to make sense for them at the end of the day, because when you do lose such a key player in as Alexander Isak, you've got to make it worthwhile losing,
Yeah, of
because
course, of course. Of course, I think we've seen clubs in the past, haven't we? I think we've seen lots of Luis Suarez when he left Liverpool all those years ago, and they received all that money for him, and they couldn't really spend it in the
Yeah.
right places. They bought Balotelli came in, I think Ricky Lambert came in as a signing there as well. It was very the money didn't go into the areas it should have gone. I probably just bought the wrong players. So I think it's one thing receiving that huge transfer fee for any football club, but I think investing it in the right areas is probably where people can have the challenges of
It's
trying to do
tough. It's tough. It's tough because think about it, right? So let's say they accept that 120 million. Isak goes.
that.
Rumor is that they go in for Ekitike for around 70 to 80 million euros, and he's unproven in the
Yeah,
Premier League. So that's a lot of money to go for someone who has no track record of doing what we know Isak can do in the Premier League. So like you're rolling the dice in a major way.
yeah,
I think that money probably be better spent getting someone like Ollie Watkins, who is proven in the Premier League at least to be able to
mm,
deliver goals and things like that. So they're in a bit of a tight spot. I think it's one of those situations where I think the longer they leave it, the trickier it becomes because, of course, players' heads get turned. You want to be able to, if you are going to move for Ekitike, you want to be able to get that deal done before you get the money from Liverpool because that tends to increase the price because now they know,
yeah,
they've got more money they can spend and blah, blah, blah. So you've got to play it kind of, in a safe way, to avoid, additional cost and expense, and just
yeah.
to touch to that, talking about playing in a safe way, what do you think Spurs should do in regards to Gibbs White and the situation there?
Yeah, I think the Gibbs White situation is just tricky, isn't it? I think obviously the player probably wants to leave Forest because I don't think these situations happen unless there's some interest there and he's had conversations with them previously. So I feel like the player will leave, and I feel like I think this whole sort of thing with, Forest giving them a written warning and all this this legal action, I don't think it's going to lead anywhere, to be honest. I think the clubs will come to an agreement at some point because when you've got players involved, and you look at the Gyökeres to Arsenal situation as well, that's a player who's going to strike. I don't think Gibbs White will take the same stance as Gyökeres, but I feel like Gibbs White will leave Tottenham. Will leave Forest to go to Tottenham. It's just a question of when, if I'm honest with you. I think this whole legal stuff, it's all noise, really. I think Forest will. I guess they've lost Elanga. I don't think they'll lose two key players. But again, when players' heads get turned and Spurs look like they're building a good team for next season, I think Gibbs White's going to want to be part of that. So I feel like eventually they'll come to an agreement. The clubs will come together, find a solution. I think Gibbs White will eventually be a Tottenham player. To be honest,
Yeah.
I think I don't know. When we look at situations like this with Gyökeres and Gibbs White and players who clearly want to make moves, what's your thoughts on players going on strike? Because we see this stuff happen often when it comes to transfers. Like players don't get their way, they want to kind of not go to training and stuff like that. How do you kind of look at that? For me, I wouldn't, as a coach, I don't think it comes across that great, to be honest, because ultimately, let's think about Gyökeres, by the way. I know we spoke about Gyökeres, who Arsenal look like they're going to sign quite soon. I think they're going to come close to an agreement. But Gyökeres, we've got to remember, he played in England a couple of years ago for Coventry. And when he did play in the Championship, he wasn't that great. Yes, he went to Portugal. He's improved. He's almost become you could say, the near perfect number 9 who can do everything. He can hunt players down. He can bring players into play. He knows when to get into the box, when to be outside the box. So also, I guess if you're looking at number 9 who can play on his own, he's almost a full package. But I mean, when you look at players sort of going on strike and stuff, what's your opinion on that?
I mean, it's crazy because at the end of the day, your contract ties you to the club, right? And
Yeah,
it was all good just a week ago, right? You know what I mean?
yeah,
So these are the type of things. But I feel like you've got to make sure as a player contractually, you're happy with your situation, regardless of if someone else comes in for you. That's why you come to find in La Liga and, leagues like that, they have the release clauses,
yeah,
and I feel like players now should, put that in, their contracts so that, if someone does meet, that clause, then away you go. So you don't have to go on strike and to be an unpleasant person and this, that, all of these things to try and force a move. to wherever it is you need to go. Thankfully, Gibbs White is not behaving in that way, which is good. He's just cracking on as per usual. Brian Mbeumo as well, that's still ongoing, but he's showing up to Brentford training as per usual. Nothing's changed. That's the attitude and mindset you should have, because you should be happy with the contract and the position you're in the first place, whether you move or you don't move, But when these things do happen, like Gyökeres, I guess those are bridges you just have to burn to maybe, force a move to where you feel you can realize your potential. The question is that will he? Because after you do all of that, what happens?
You got to produce. Yeah, you got to. If he does go to Arsenal, he's got to produce. And I remember, I guess I said before, this is a player who's been here before in England, and he didn't quite pull up any trees. So it'd be interesting to see. And again, just because players may appear to be the perfect fit when they're playing in another league, it doesn't mean when they come into the Premier League that they're automatically going to settle and become that player. I remember when Shevchenko came to Chelsea all those years ago, and he was again AC Milan star striker. And he just didn't fit in. It wasn't because he was a bad player or he didn't try. It just maybe the league didn't suit him, or the players he had around him didn't accommodate to his strengths. We saw Torres going to Chelsea from Liverpool as well. Again, he was a Premier League proven player, but it just didn't really fit. So players can, kind of get their move, but doesn't automatically mean that they're gonna, produce in the first season.
This is it. That's right. And I feel like Arsenal fans at this point have it that we're gonna win the league if we just get this number 9 in because he's a goal machine. Mate, two things can be true. He's a goal machine, but doesn't score goals in your system or at your club. Like, these two things can be true. So I'll be intrigued to see how if he does sign and everything goes the way it's supposed to, how all of that kind of stuff plays out, because it'll be such a shame. 80+ million, and he scores 10 goals, maybe 15 all comps. That would be an embarrassment.
It'll be an embarrassment, but I think if Arsenal win the Premier League, they won't complain, to be honest, because they'll say, well, we've got a number 9. He's contributed to 15 goals. We're getting goals from other areas, whether that's through Saka or Odegaard. So I think if they do sign Gyökeres and they do win the Premier League, they'll say, listen, we've got a number 9, and he was a difference. He was a difference maker, and we won the league as a result. But one player who's returned to the Premier League, Jordan Henderson, gone to Brentford.
Oh, yes.
Speaking about Brian Mbeumo, I think, we look at Brentford, they lost their manager. Thomas Frank has gone to Spurs. And Mbeumo looks like he could be heading out the door to Man United. Norgard's gone to Arsenal. And then they've got a new manager in, is it Keith Andrews, the new manager at Brentford?
That's correct, yeah.
So how do you kind of see their chances this year? Because usually when a club of that size loses their key figures, it's not always an easy task to kind of, pull up more trees, I suppose. So how do you kind of see Jordan Henderson coming to Brentford? And did you expect to see him back in the Premier League after he went to Saudi and then went to Ajax? Did you expect to see him back in the Premier League?
You know what? Like, I thought maybe it would be Sunderland, going back to his old club, these type of things, have that storyline, not Brentford, honestly, because I just don't see what Jordan Henderson, besides his leadership qualities and all the qualities he brings that are not on the field, I don't see what he brings on the field. Do you see what I mean? So you lose Norgard, who I think at this current stage is a better player than Jordan Henderson. It's not a like for like, so I think that's going to hurt them in the long run. And so far, it doesn't look like they've, replaced Mbeumo. Wisa could also go, these type of things. So I tip them to actually possibly be, fighting to survive. New manager, big changes and key players. So far it seems like every season they lose 1 or 2 key players. Last season it was Tony. They found a way through it, but this time you lose your manager, you lose your centre midfielder, and potentially your right winger. That's massive. So let's see how it plays out.
I mean, one thing I'll add to that before we move on to our next topic, but I think with Jordan Henderson, I know you mentioned him not bringing much on the field, but I'd probably say when you look at the Liverpool team he played in, he wasn't considered even though he was captain there, he wasn't considered perhaps the most talented player in his team, or maybe the most influential in terms of his technical ability and what he offered in games. But I mean, his leadership qualities were clear to see. So I feel like Brentford losing their manager, Keith Andrews coming in relatively inexperienced. As you mentioned, they lost Tony in the last couple of years. They've also gone and looks like they'll be losing. And Bremo, Norgard's gone. I think this is when they're crying out for somebody who's got that leadership experience, that Premier League experience. Maybe not playing or fighting in that position in the league, but this is somebody who's been there, who's done it. Maybe he's lost his legs somewhat, but he will be influential in the dressing room, on the pitch, to kind of get the team through the tricky moments. So maybe he's not there to kind of play every single week, but somebody who's influential around the dressing room. He can kind of galvanize that team. Again, because you've got a manager who's been looking for leaders as well, experienced people you can rely on.
Yeah,
so I feel like
what you're saying.
Yeah, I think Henderson will be key in that aspect of it. So I agree. I think they'll struggle next season, but I feel like by bringing Henderson, I don't think that's a bad move, because they'll be crying out for leaders.
Henderson's like main attribute in football is his work rate.
Yeah,
is his stamina to get up and around the field. His legs are going, or have possibly gone. So I just don't see how you utilize him in the Premier League at the pace that it actually goes. You see what I mean? But this is what's exciting about,
James Milner. You won't play every single week, but when you're needed, we can call upon you. We can rely on you.
Yeah,
you've got that experience. Again, not just on the pitch, but in the dressing room. And the team's going through a tough time. When they're inexperienced managers looking for someone to rely on, the leadership figure, I think Henderson can be the perfect guy to do that. I don't think it's a bad move. I think it's actually a sensible move from Brentford. But it remains to be seen whether they'll survive with that current setup.
We shall see.
We'll see. But anyway, Flexx, the juicy topic for today is modern football. Modern football. What do we listen? I think I'm one of those people we spoke about before, but I'm one of those people who kind of feels like modern football now is not as exciting as it was 20 years ago because of how it's played right now. The characters we've got in the game, even the managers, actually. I think the managers back then, we had characters, we had unique football figures, icons. And it feels like now when you look on the touchline, everyone's kind of molded the same. Yes, some are more successful than others, but they're all kind of similar. They're all in their tracksuits. They're all doing the same things on the touchline. You've got the couple of them like Conte or Inzaghi, who's very animated, but they're all kind of similar. And I feel like football back in the day, we used to have showboats. We used to have players who would, almost make it feel like you wanted to go and play football on the pitch yourself. And I feel like now we're kind of missing those characters in the game. And you talk about watching 90 minutes of football. It can be quite tough because usually when you're watching football nowadays in the Premier League, it's almost a routine. You've got the one side who's more talented, who'll dominate possession. Then you've got the other side who will sit back, try and counter-attack and try and, kind of close gaps and stuff like that. And that's just a routine, and it just keeps recycled, and it's recycled again. Whereas I felt like back in the day, we had, of course, the better teams and the less better teams, but we felt as if the teams that had maybe not as many talented players would have a few players in there who could cause problems because individually they were great. And if you look at the Premier League, for instance, back in the day, you used to have players like Gianfranco Zola, Di Canio, Morgan Gareth Pedersen, players like, Yakubu, Benjani,
JJ Okocha, yeah, that's the same, man. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Players like that who play for lesser teams, but they were talented and they made all these players were great on the board as well. JJ Okocha was almost like you could create a 1 hour YouTube highlight reel of his skills and his contribution to the game. But it feels like now we're missing those figures and those players. What's your opinions on modern football compared to football of like 20 years ago?
It's definitely a tougher watch, and this is why I feel like in some cases fans of football are now becoming fans of other sports in a major way, like basketball, because it's all action, and when you have coaches like Guardiola and everyone else who wants to be like Guardiola, you end up with a whole chess match for 90 minutes with maybe within that 90 minutes, 2 moments of sheer individual brilliance, and that is not enough, especially if you're paying such a high subscription for these games and things like that. So it's definitely a harder watch. I definitely, like today, do not watch as much football as I used to watch it. Back in the day, it would be like, oh my gosh, like this game is on. And it could be, let's say, Southampton against maybe like a Bolton or something like that.
Yeah.
But you would want to watch it because there could be something that's in like some interesting bits of play that takes place during that game. But today, I'm not entirely bothered. Like, if let's say there's an Arsenal versus again, let's say a Southampton, for example, I don't care to miss the game, and I'm not too bothered because we know what we're kind of gonna get. We're gonna get that vertical football that just goes left, right, and then eventually we're going to try and get the ball out to the wing. We're going to cut back. We're going to, and it's the same thing, rinse, repeat, whether it's broken or not. We're just going to keep doing the same thing until it works. And
That's it.
for me, football has definitely become boring. It's definitely dying until somebody comes and shakes it up. We need those Mavericks. I mean, just look at the clip that's playing underneath, and we're seeing these Mavericks that just made football exciting. Look at the nutmeg, look at the flick over the head, and look at the
It just makes you smile watching this. You're just smiling. It's like Ronaldinho playing football with a smile on his face because he's having fun. He's having fun on the pitch, and people would probably argue that. I mean, look, people would probably argue that the teams are more competitive, and it's a lot of the Premier League's exciting because of that reason. Listen, no doubt, teams are better as a collective. Teams are better. Yeah. They're giving the better teams a run for their money, and they're getting closer to playing. Not closing the gap, but compete for Champions League spots, which didn't happen 20 years ago. It was a so-called top four, and the other teams were definitely below that. We're not going to reach that level. But I remember Matt Letizia saying one thing in an interview once. He said he viewed football as entertainment. He viewed it as entertainment, not just a sport, but entertainment. People were there to pay money to watch him entertain them. And that explained it with his goals. I mean, Matt Letizier's, Premier League goal, listen, the catalogue of goals he scored were just out of this world. You don't see anything like that again. And I just feel like there's a big difference. Yes, teams are better now collectively, but I just feel like the players we had in the 2000s, I feel like the 2000s where it really peaked in terms of the superstars.
Elite players, man. Elite
Figo,
players during that.
Zidane, Henry, Ronaldinho, Ronaldo, Henry.
It's like I remember seeing a clip where basically you had the Real Madrid Galacticos walking out, and then you had the Man United. I guess at that time it would have been the Man United Galacticos, and you're just like, look at the names on either side. Like, these are real footballers. Like, are you mad? You know what I mean? Like, it's totally different. You know even what makes football boring now as well? Just to touch on it, is that like they're all flipping friends. It doesn't really exist anymore because we're all friends and we're gonna go out tomorrow, and it's like, if you beat me, okay, here's my shirt, and all of this. Like, do you remember the days where Roy Keane was ready to take off Vieira's tunnel at Highbury, and there was like 50 fouls, in that game where people were literally going for each other's throat.
But do you know where that stems from? Do you know what that stems from? The managers. The managers had a dislike for each other, a deep dislike for each other, particularly Ferguson and Wenger. The managers did not like each other, and that spread out to the players who went on in the pitches and listen, this is not a game, this is war for us. They took it seriously. Even the likes of Mourinho. Look at Mourinho and Pep Guardiola at Madrid and Barcelona. Those games were wars. They were one-sided because Barca dominated the ball, but those games were wars because the mentality from the managers was that we don't like them, they don't like us. Whereas now, it's all very friendly, it's competitive, but it's not to the point where people dislike each other. And I feel like sometimes that tension is kind of missing from games, which makes it a lot more intriguing to watch. Because you didn't just watch it back in the day for what was happening on the pitch. You watched it for what happened on the touchline. Benitez and Jose didn't like each other. Wenger and Ferguson didn't like each other. Mourinho and Pep didn't like each other. Yeah. Players and managers generally had respect for each other, but there's a dislike there. And that's probably missing now from the game massively. But, I mean, when you look at the players now, we're missing all these, special, unique players who could do what we've seen on the screen now. Do you think academies play a big part in that? Because if we look at 100%. Players who grew up in the 2000s or players who played in the 90s, when you look at their background story, they all say we played street football. We played football in the street with our friends. Players maybe from London like Joe Cole and Rio Ferdinand, they all played cage football. And that contributed towards their outlook on football. It wasn't just a sport, but it was something it's a place they could go to express themselves. And we don't see many players now on a pitch expressing themselves. And academies nowadays probably try to take the element out of players. So do you think that
Do,
academies
do, do
play
you
a
know?
big
Do,
part?
you know what it is? Do you know what it is? Right. For example, the cage footballers and so on
Yeah,
are the managers of today, right?
yeah,
So you're looking at Lampard, Gerrard, and many others. They're actually managers today. Now, the problem we have is that football has shifted drastically to system-based football.
mm,
So that system gets, whatever the head coach is, it gets bled through at every single level. So as I said before, left right, get the ball to the byline, flash it across the goal so that Sterling can get a tap in. How many tap in goals did we just knew he would be at the back post ready to
yeah,
tap it in because it's all system based, and it wouldn't matter if it was Sterling or someone from the under 18s because they're doing the same thing at that level too. So they can quite literally just swap out one player for another because there is no space for being a maverick. This is why Jack Grealish doesn't flourish at Manchester City
mhm,
because it's a maverick that's being suppressed into a system,
yeah,
and it just doesn't work for him. So the coaching it happens from let's say the mind of Guardiola, and then it filters through into this trickle down football, and then everyone else now becomes a system based. You realize that those teams they struggle against the teams that don't play system based football.
mm,
They struggle against a team that goes route one. Look at
yeah,
Crystal Palace against City in the cup
yeah,
final, and every time Palace have actually played City and have beat them at the Etihad,
mm,
they play in a way that's not system based with the vertical or horizontal ball movements. No, we're going to go route one. It's going to go from back to forward very quickly. Mateta's going to hold the ball up. Old school Bolton. That's
yeah,
what they were doing. Old
yeah,
school Bolton with
mm,
Kevin Davis up front.
yeah,
Like old school, and they don't like it because it kind of befuddles them. It's like, oh my gosh, that's like we haven't trained for it. Like, oh, we don't know kind of what to do. Like,
mm,
because it's not like what we're used to kind of thing. So
yeah.
it is all very much different, and yeah,
It's
that's just
different. It is what it is right now. I think we kind of agree that probably people will say it's nostalgia, but I don't think it's nostalgia. I think if you look at the players we had back in those days, I genuinely believe, and I won't change my mind, that we had better football players. I think teams are better now as a collective because of the systems you've mentioned there. But I feel like when we talk about individual brilliance, I mean, I don't think we'll see what we saw in the 2000s. I don't think we'll see that again, to be fair. Because I think teams are taking it out of
I
players.
think we will. I think we will. I think everything
I
happens
don't
in
think we will.
cycles.
I don't think you mentioned Jack Grealish. I don't think players have that freedom to express themselves because managers
No,
see it
we'll
as a
see
way.
it. We will see it. We'll see it. Everything happens in cycles. This is just the cycle of the system. Because remember, there was a time where 4-4-2 was the main system to play.
Yeah.
And then Jose Mourinho came around and it became that whole 4-3-3,
Mhm.
and then that became the in thing. And then Pep came along and then it became false nines. That became the thing for a period of time. And then now it's what it is today. So there will be a point where we do get back to the Mavericks and we do get back to the exciting football. The question is when and how
Probably
long,
50 years time.
you
50 years
know.
time, bro. Years time. Well, last question before we go. Last question: is the golden age of football? Have we seen that? Has it been there and gone now, or will you feel like we'll see another golden age of football again?
I think we'll definitely see another golden age because again, everything's in cycles. But the one that's already happened is it's come and gone. That's already happened where almost every team had superstars. That's gone now.
Mm,
But will we see that again? Of course we will, because there's too much money in football. There's clubs now, almost every club has got money, which makes it attractive to everyone. So
yeah,
those superstars will be spread out here, there, and everywhere. And exciting football, I hope, comes back around again.
cool. Lastly, who's your favorite player in the 2000s?
Ronaldinho, personally, the greatest of all time.
Yeah. Mine
Yeah,
was in 2000. I've got to say probably Kaká. I think Kaká was a player I watched and I thought, wow. I didn't see a player do what he could do. I think probably him or the Brazilian Ronaldo. I think those two are the players I thought, yeah, these players are on. When you look at a player, you think this player's unstoppable. That was the feeling I had when I watched Ronaldo and I watched
yeah,
Kaká. Like, Kaká for me was just amazing. I think it's a shame how his career kind of turned out with injuries at Madrid, but the AC Milan Kaká was just
yeah.
sensational.
Unreal, Unreal. I just remember that goal at Old Trafford where he headed the ball and Evra and
Ramsey,
Hinsley
yeah,
clattered
Hamza.
into
Yeah,
each other, and then
that
he
was a game I
slotted
thought,
it
yeah,
in. Oh
Kaka's a
mate.
great player. That was a game I thought, yeah, Kaka is an absolute genius. I love the guy, really humble as well. But as a footballer, I didn't see anything like him, to be fair. So, yeah, I think that's all good. But
Hey,
listen,
but notice real quick before we wrap it up there. Notice how we only mentioned Brazilians,
yeah,
and I feel like when the Brazilians resurgence comes back around again, we are going to see exciting football again. You know,
yeah.
when that whole South American thing, those Mavericks start showing up, we're back in for it again.
I agree. They were their benchmark for a long time. Brazilians. They set the standard. The 2002 World Cup for me was just in a nutshell what they were about. To be honest, the three Ronaldinho, great footballers, and yeah, they set the benchmark. But listen, Flexx has been great as always to chat today.
It has.
Guys,
It
like we
has.
mentioned, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with our views on football now compared to what it was 20 years ago? Let us know about your opinions on the transfers. And listen, Chelsea fans, get in the comments. We want to see you guys celebrate your victory, your fantastic victory against PSG the other day. But again,
Yes.
it's been great. Guys, like, share, subscribe. Also follow us on Instagram and TikTok now. We've got a TikTok page, so follow us on TikTok. You see all the latest content on there. But yeah, Flexx, it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure as always, my man, and we'll be right back here again next week. With
That's
more
it.
interesting topics. So for sure, have a good one.
That's it, bro. Take care.
Take care.